I would say one of the scariest moments for any single parent is when they lose their employment.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so we thought we'd talk about that today. You and I, Lily, have both suffered that, lived through that. So it's a weighty topic, but I think it's important for us to talk about how it feels and how you get through it. So let's get started.
I'm Lily, single mom to teen twins.
Mother! I'm recording in here.
And I'm Scott, single dad to a preteen boy.
Dad!
It's under the sink!
We're two old friends trying to navigate single parenting.
And spending the whole time thinking, I hope I don't fuck this up. So, how many times, Lily, have you, through whatever way, it has happened, have you lost your gainful employment?
I worked in media, or had worked in media for the majority of my career, and I had never been laid off ever because I worked in digital.
Uh-huh.
And from 1998, when I started working after college until the pandemic, I was always kind of in the lucky spot of doing something that was vital, and like print people got laid off, and those people were, and sometimes, tech companies folded and things like that. But I was lucky in that never happened to me until the pandemic. And I got way underpaid, which we can talk about later. But,
that's a whole different thing.
When the pandemic happened, I had just gotten separated from my husband at the end of 2019. Pandemic, we're locked down in March. And in May, I got laid off.
Right, so they happened right on top of each other.
Oh, I had a banner year.
You went from 2 incomes to 1 income to no income, all in the same year.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What we don't talk about enough about this, I think, is that it is traumatic.
Oh my God.
Regardless of how you lose your job, whether
I went out of the house and I bought cigarettes. Like, that's
oh my God. Well, you know what? But it's like we hear so often of like, oh, it happens to everybody, live through it. I do think it's important to acknowledge that it is traumatic when it happens, regardless of who you are.
Yeah.
Whether you have savings that you can walk away, whatever it is, It is a traumatic life change. And it is 100% more traumatic when you are the only income.
Yeah, and I was at a point in my life where I did have savings. Like, we had separated all of our money. Like, I was the one who had I'm incredibly I become a money hoarder because of like my insecurity around money, being raised by a single mom and never being able to afford anything. So I have a lot of insecurity around money. Even when I was gainfully employed, most of those 20 years beforehand, I would save whatever I can. Like, I genuinely don't. I'm not a luxurious spender. I'm not into shoes or clothes. I do love furniture, so I will spend money on that. But I will hoard, and my biggest expense is like getting delivery, like takeout,
which is a bigger expense than you expect.
Now it's a much bigger expense for sure.
It's a big expense.
But I had money in a savings account, and I, at the time of the when that happened with the pandemic, they not only it wasn't quite a doubling of unemployment, but it was like 1.5 times the regular unemployment. But like,
oh, really?
1.5 times, not a lot. It's still not a lot. Yeah, they supplemented it, and then they extended unemployment for a really long time. But like, which was amazing, and I would not have survived as long as I had to without it. And I had child support at that time too, because he didn't get laid off until later. So I was able to make it work, but I felt so unmoored that I thought, like, you calculate your lifeline. Like, you're like, okay, well, if I spend exactly this amount, like, I have this amount of money coming in, and if I spend this amount of money and I don't pay this and I don't pay this, I can last paying my rent, let's say, for X amount of time.
I'm like literally having flashbacks.
Yeah.
I feel that
calculations is awful, especially when my kids at the time were 13 or about to turn, or had just turned 13, 12 or 13. And we're in the middle of a pandemic, and your parents just got separated. Like, what I was trying to do is not worry them more than they were already worried.
Did you tell them? Did you tell them?
I didn't right away. I
How long
pretended to work.
How long did you take?
Well, we were in the same house. We were all quarantined in the same house, and they were going to school. And I didn't tell them for a while. I can't remember quite how long, but it was a while.
Well, I never told my son.
Oh, you didn't?
I just reframed it. But I will say the first feeling I felt more than anything is as a person who, unfortunately, many Americans do, we define ourselves often by our employment and our job. There's like this sense of this is who I am. And when that gets taken away, it's hard. It's hard to like be like, all right, this is not who I am anymore, or I have to redefine what it is. And it's a traumatic feeling. And then realizing, oh crap, am I going to have enough money to pay for my family? And am I going to have, what am I going to do? And I had just spent all of my savings on the divorce. So I had no savings. And so I'm just sitting here like, and this I think is true. I mean, most single parents especially are not going to have a ton of savings. It's just not in the cards for most people.
We hadn't gotten divorced. Like we were just separated and we were using a mediator. And so like we did some of the mediation through that time. But I told him, I was like, I'm not spending more money to get divorced right now. We now need your insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Because his insurance was free. Like the job he had, he paid nothing for it. So it was no cost to him to keep me on it. And he was like, yeah, of course. Like it's a pandemic. If you have to get hospitalized, I'm not taking you off of my insurance. You know, we were all really worried about dying at that point, just to set the context right. And it took me a solid year to get a job again, which was a first for me. Like I'd left a job before and had that same kind of identity crisis, but it was of my own doing. And I'd freelanced for a long time. And I was like, I don't need a job. I'm a 2-income household where I'm making enough money. It's not a big deal. And it did take a long time to get a job then, but it didn't feel like pressure. But this felt like there was no pressure that I had ever felt before. Like I felt this one. And I took a $60,000 pay cut to take the first job that was offered to me. Which I feel no qualms about whatsoever. I just needed to have a job. It was a step or two down from where I had been, and I do not care. Like it doesn't matter. I'll do a great job. Just let me convince you that I will be the right one to do it. And then I got laid off. That company got acquired 4 or 5 months into my being there and got laid off less than a year after I had started.
Oh my God.
And luckily, like at that point of the pandemic, like we had swung up again and people were hiring again and things were, so I got a job again right away. Laid off of that one too, again, about a year later. So I had in the course of 3 years. Oh, I know. I started consulting after that one.
You can't lay me off if I'm
wall.
consulting.
Yeah. I saw the writing on the wall, started consulting. I was like, everybody else is about to get laid off too. I'm going to get this consulting work before everybody else get laid off. And the job that I have now kind of just came knocking on my door while I was consulting. Again, a situation where I was making enough money. I wasn't looking for anything, and something came along that I couldn't turn down. But that was 3 layoffs in 4 years and a divorce. And I still feel like I'm recovering financially. Like, there are things that here's an example. Like we just had a winter break for our kids. There's a spring break coming up. And I would love to do nothing more than to take my seniors on to some Caribbean getaway just for 3 or 4 nights, that our last time together while they're at home. And I look at the prices of a trip, and I'm like, I can't pay $9,000 for us to go on a trip right now because I'm still recovering from these 4 years of putting. I don't use credit cards, but I had to put things on credit cards, like my tax bill.
No, you get into debt. I mean, that's the thing that also it's you lose your job, and it's a compounding interest of shit. Because it's you set your entire life is set up, whether you do it on purpose or not, is all set upon that paycheck. And when that paycheck goes away, suddenly you're in debt you weren't in before. all the, all your lifestyle. You don't want to give up on your lifestyle. Like, so now you have to back away from your lifestyle and start changing that. But to me, the hardest part is I've had to start over many times in my life for various reasons, usually to reasons that I chose. And this was I have to start over at my age and I have to start over. I ended up starting my own business. And for that first like 6 or 8 months, I didn't know how it was going to do. And thankfully it's doing well now. But like for 6 to 8 months, you can't look into the future. You don't know. And it's why I have a friend who got laid off at the same time, lost her job same time as I did. And he said, I know how to do this. I know how to game LinkedIn. I know how to I know how to look for a job. And so he just focused on that. And it has been almost 2 years and he still doesn't have a job.
Yeah. There's no gaming LinkedIn right now.
You can't. It's AI has screwed us all.
And like, let's forget even all of what might be working against us technologically. There are so many people who are laid off right now.
Well,
the governmental layoffs like compounding it. But I genuinely am scared for the future, given, the amount of people, human beings that are being laid off. But they're the volume in general, like, my ex also got laid off a year ago in last September, so a year and a half. And he works in a profession that's dying, and he's getting interviews, which is good. And like, he's like, oh, I got this other interview, it probably won't lead to anything. I was like, dude, just be grateful you're getting them, because other people are not even getting in. They're not getting in. And I'm a fairly successful person. And and I'm a hard worker. And even if my bosses like think I'm a little bit of a pain in the ass, like they know I can get the job done, and my teams love me, and my LinkedIn will attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was shameful. It felt very shameful that like, I had been the breadwinner for the majority of our time as a family since the kids were born. I was the majority breadwinner too. So like, there was a lot of shame for me around.
Oh yeah.
Not knowing how I was going to, like, I don't feel shameful at all about getting unemployment, because I will get on that as soon as that comes. But I also applied for food stamps, because I thought like, there's only so much money coming in. Food is our biggest expense outside of our rent. And I felt such shame every time I had to use that card at the grocery store.
That is, I know we're not here to give advice, but maybe make you feel a little bit better about, which is like, a single parent cannot afford shame. You just can't. You have someone, your family you need to take care of. And like, my girlfriend, I met my girlfriend after I lost my job. So maybe that's why I lost my job, so that I could meet my girlfriend. I had, as part of my package, I had, insurance for about 6 months. And then, I think Cobra is the world's biggest scam. I will not do Cobra, because it's just, why would I want to tie myself to those prices, to the crappy insurance? So I didn't do Cobra.
You mean you didn't want to pay like $1,700 a month for like your special healthcare that you got
without knowing that I can afford it? No. And so I get to the end of that healthcare, and I'm looking around, I'm starting my business. I have clients, but I don't have any money yet. Yeah. And my girlfriend's like, get on Medicaid. And I'm like,
yep, I did that too.
Get on Medicare.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's, it felt shameful. I'm like, why would I get on Medicare? It's like, just do it. And so I applied for it and I got it.
Yep.
And it changed my life. Yep. I will say, without, like, it like tears me up to think.
Yeah.
Like,
no, I felt the same.
It changes your life to know that our biggest fear is, I think, health. Like it's underlying, like healthcare is just such this basic right that we're denied. And being able to rely on that really got me through, and, got me to the other side. And so when, like, the healthcare system in this country is so fucked up. And if you're lucky enough, I live in Connecticut, and we have a much stronger safety net than a lot of other states. If you're lucky enough to live in one of those states, you don't have pride about it. You just do it.
I still had pride, and I still did it anyway. And like, I would never, ever judge anyone else for taking advantage of the services that our country provides for them when they're in a position to need it. Like, I definitely don't think anybody's out there abusing healthcare, for example. Like,
Yeah, I really don't.
I don't think it's possible to abuse that. Food stamps, same thing. Like, if you got a mom and you got 5 kids and like she can't work because it's too expensive to pay for the care of those children, and then all of her money goes to caring for those children and can't buy food and pay rent. Like, I get it fully, but still I felt personal shame about it.
I every time I had to hand over the card.
Like, my mother even said to me, I think one of the times that I got laid off during that period, I was talking to her and my stepdad and like telling them, and my stepdad was being very understanding. And I was like, well, I applied for the unemployment and it should come fast. And my mom goes, oh, you applied for unemployment? And my stepdad goes, that's what it's there for,
That's
Dean.
what it's there for. Can we say that? Can we just remind everyone that that's what this is here for? That's what Medicare is here for. That's what, all of these programs are here so that when you get knocked down, it is not impossible to get back up again. That's why it's there. And we have like turned it into this, by calling it entitlement. We're entitled to it. Not we are like walking around feeling entitled and just taking. We're entitled to this. Use it.
And we paid it, not only entitled, but we paid into it. Like,
but that's what entitled means. It means
well, yes,
we
but also
deserve
like
it.
I don't mind if somebody else is getting it when I'm not. Like, if I'm paying into it now so that you can have your unemployment, and then if I get unemployed, you're paying into it so I can have it. I mean, it's a beautiful system. Like, if it works.
It works when, I could go forever about how we've decided that there's a whole essentially group of people that abuse this and we don't relate to them anymore. And that's why we want to cut the programs.
Yeah, I don't think that exists. I really don't.
But I think that's how people feel.
That is what a lot of people feel.
It's not true. It's just how they feel. But like, it is funny, that shame. And by the way, I feel like we're just depressing the hell out of our audience. We both have gone through the other side of this. And hopefully part of what, you hear when we talk about this, even if it is scary out there, is that it's like, what it did for me was that it forced me to be, creative and adapt in what I do and to not rely on any one thing. And like starting my business meant, having to learn how to go out and network with people that I didn't network before. And, I discovered that there was a whole group of, I have a history, and you forget that when you work at one company, that you have a history of people that you worked with. Anyone who ever left that company is somebody that you can talk to. And like, and as you build that circle up again, like it was actually really helpful. And other people had lost their jobs, and that was helpful to like connect with them. But it still didn't. It was helpful, but it didn't solve anything.
But you never know. Like that, I think it's like, that is a good point of to remind people of, because I think you often feel really bad asking for people for help in those situations who have a job, or like you see a job posted at their company and you haven't talked to them in 10 years and you're like, hey, remember when we used to work together? Maybe some people are annoyed by that. But if it's me and I ever get that message, and I've gotten it many, 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 many times, I'm like, yep, I'll find out for you. I'll do what I can. Like, obviously I can't go so far depending on what it is, but like, I will put your resume in the system. I will give you my recommendation. I'll pass it along. If the only thing I can do is like find out the name of the hiring person for you, because I don't know them, I will do that for you. And I think that's how everybody should be, but I don't know that everybody is.
I think that's how people, I think more people are like that than you think. Like a lot of times the fear is that people aren't like us when really they are. Like if, I have never once been annoyed by anybody asking me for help. Never. I can't imagine. I've had people ask me check in every month to see if there's something. And I was never annoyed by it. So there was a study that showed that you were much more likely to get a job from somebody that you only kind of known, a casual acquaintance, than you are from your inner circle. Your inner circle are actually much less likely. And I think a lot of that has just to do with the numbers game, right? Like you just need to widen that circle. But I thought that was interesting.
But it also, like, I can see like this other side of that where if somebody's too close, like getting them a job at your place can feel like almost like nepotism, like
if you're... It has to be they know too much about you. They remember that night you were drunk all night. And it's like, no, I want the person just remembering how competent I was at that job.
To give people hope. Like even when you feel like you've lost hope and like you've applied to 752 LinkedIn job postings and you haven't heard back from one, being that person who does reach out and communicates with like, telling the people in your circle and then having them spread the word for you, well, it might feel like nothing. The way that I just got my last job was my boss from the company that got acquired, so I didn't work for her very long, but I've kept up the relationship, and like we'll go out and have drinks, and we genuinely like each other. We'll go out and have drinks occasionally, but a recruiter came to her and was like, hey, are you interested in this job? And she's like, I'm not, but I know somebody who is. And like passed him on to me. And again, like I said, it was an opportunity that I couldn't turn down, which was amazing. But that, like, I know it sounds like when you're unemployed, it sounds like a unicorn story that won't happen to you, but it's possible. Like I was saying, my ex is also unemployed right now. So it's a struggle for him too. He lives with his girlfriend. So it's so laid off. Like, I swear to God, everybody's laid off.
Oh my God, what's going on right now, man? It's crazy.
It's
crazy.
a lot. So they have each other at least, like, to share for the rent or whatever. And I've got the kids most of the time. So the struggle has been, I haven't gotten child support. So it's been difficult. But like, with me having a job, it's been less difficult. But I keep telling him, I was like, do you just have to, like, I said to him, he's like, I can't believe these cover letters are it's such a pain. I can't believe I have to write one. And I took a screenshot of my cover letter folder where I have all of the cover, and the scroll on it was infinite. I was like, listen, it's going to take a lot. It's going to be annoying, and you're going to have to write a million cover letters. And I think I applied to, like, on a slow day, 5 jobs, and I would, spam it. But I know it feels impossible, but one of them is going to hit eventually. And it might be something that, like, you don't want, or it might be something that pays a lot less than you thought. And I think for women, I think tend to be more okay with doing that, like stepping back or stepping down. But I think men have like an bigger ego about it. And I don't think you should. Like, I was ready to go drive Uber. If it came down to it, I would drive an Uber, or, I kept telling my ex, I was like, well, if it gets real bad, he can walk dogs. Like, he loves dogs, like loves walking. He has a dog.
Funny. Everybody the women in my life were the ones that would be telling me that. So I'd hear a lot of just bring in the dollars. And the guys in my life would be like, hold out for the right job. Once you go down the wrong path, it can be hard. And they're not wrong in that there is a certain amount of image of your kind of LinkedIn image. I mean, part of the reason why I decided... You don't have to put
your dog walking on LinkedIn.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There is that. And there's lots of... For me, it was about, like, I applied for about a year and got very few interviews. And I'm not to toot my own horn, but I have a good LinkedIn. Like, I have good experience. Yes. I have all of these things. I've done a lot in my career. And I just realized that being part of, it's not always about you. It's about the market. It's about what people need.
Absolutely.
And if you get to a certain level, like I've gotten to, there aren't that many fewer jobs that need that.
Yeah. And the competition is better, I will say. Like, but as you progress, like, for Scott and I, who worked in, corporate media, not only are there fewer jobs, but the wheat gets separated from the chaff, let's say. So, like,
you're up against the best.
Yeah. Or like, you're up against the best. People who aren't that into it have already, like, bounced and changed careers and become horse therapists or whatever. True story.
I was hoping that was a true story.
Absolutely. It's a true story. But the competition is so much harder. And I think, as parents, like, we're older at this point, and we're a riskier hire too, because as a single parent, or as somebody who's older, who commands more money, or if you're not in a position where you make a lot of money, but you're still older, like, I thought about, like, well, could I go waitressing again? And I can't, because nobody's going to want to hire me. Because I haven't been waitressing since I was 19, 20 years old, and I'm old and I'm slow, for comparatively to the wait staff.
I think you would be a sassy waitress.
I was the worst.
I could just see you being very judgmental of somebody's order. I mean, really? You're going to eat that looking like that?
Judge
really?
them. But if I remembered to write all the things down, unlike
I have the worst
in
memory.
Anything else, like, I would not remember things. I'd forget to go check on a table. I wouldn't really care. Like, if somebody got flirty with me, I'd get really, depending on the person, really, really uncomfortable and mean.
It was funny because I found that, like, you and I are up against two things, in that it's the age and the parenting. It's like both those things. It's the double whammy, because you're thankfully, at least from an employment situation, moving out of having to worry about the kids. But, like, for me, I'm 98% parent, right? Like I have him 98% of the time, which really limits a lot of what I can do in a job. Like I can't move states. I can't leave.
Yeah.
I can't, I need, if I were a federal employee told to have to be back 5 days a week, I'd have a hard time with that because childcare is really difficult.
And that is kind of surprising, the amount of people who suggest that to you. Well, you live in New York. To me, why don't you move? I'm like, well, their dad lives here. I'm not
you
going
can't.
anywhere.
You don't have that option. And, I talked about moving towns and my ex freaked out a little bit. Like I just talked about saying I'm in an expensive town. What if I moved to a cheaper town, sold my house, bought something cheaper? And she was freaking out that I was moving 2 towns away. So like, you just don't have the same flexibility. I had interviews where people would ask me about that stuff, which was crazy to me. Like they'd be like, you're a dad. Like, how are you? What if I need you tomorrow? How are you going to make it in? If you need childcare quickly, how are you going to do it? Do you have a support system? Like I was being asked about my support system and having to outline how it would work. And I was also asked about my age, I was asked one time, are you sure you'll have the energy for this job? And then another person asked me, how are you going to relate to the people under you? As if relating to somebody who's 7 years younger than me is going to be so impossible. And I just went back. My first boss, when I was at MTV, and my first boss was probably in his late 50s or early 50s at the time. I was 24. I learned way more from him. He still calls me on my birthday, and I still call him on his birthday. And he got me, he's gotten me some work lately with some clients and things like that. Like that was someone that if we go by the rubric of today, I should have no way of relating to, right? If we go by that fear. And instead, one of the most important relationships I had in my kind of early development, and not just with me, with a lot of people my age that he was overseeing. So like we have this feeling that you can't relate to someone that is not your generation. It's funny. I work with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce right now. I produce a show for them. And what I love about the team is the host who's in his 60s, there's me and the VP that I report to, who's probably about 10 years younger than me. Yeah. And then there's the booker who is about 15 years younger than me. And then the associate producer who is probably in her mid-20s. And we have no problem relating to each other. It is not even a question. I have no problem reporting to somebody, that's significantly younger than me because he's a really smart guy. And what am I going to have problems reporting to someone capable?
I will say, like, sorry, go ahead, finish.
No, I'm ranting at this point. It's just going.
You are.
I am ranting, but it really gets me because it's this lack of kind of respect for our own ability to change. Like we're able to read a situation and change and learn and still be valuable.
We're in media, but we've worked in technology essentially since the beginning of our careers.
Yeah.
And we, at every, 2-3 years, something new came along. We'd have to learn it and adapt and figure out how to use it. Like I got told that I didn't get it about TikTok. And I was like, oh, baby, that's cute that you think that I don't get it and that you think it's any different. Okay.
It's the same.
It's the same.
It's all the same.
I was going to say, like, you said something interesting about like your single dadness and like people asking you about that. I found that I could use that to my advantage. And this might be a woman thing too.
Yeah, it might be.
And I will say this is like for me as a hiring manager, I will always hire the mom. Like I know that there is no one who works harder than a mom who wants to like get away from her kids for 8 hours, come in, do the work, get everything done, be able to multitask and get out of there at the end of the day. I will hire her any day over somebody who is not a mom.
Is dicking around. Because that's what a lot of it is
or
dicking
younger
around.
Who like, is trying to climb and like, or whatever, like maybe it doesn't feel like a fit, but I don't find that as a disqualifier in any way. And when I was interviewing, I used that. So I said like, listen, I will be the hardest work you have. Like I need this I support my kids. My kids live with me and you will find nobody who's more committed than I am to this job because I need it and I want it and I will commit 100%. And so I tried to, take what might be seen as a as a disadvantage and turn it to my advantage.
I think that's really smart. I mean, I tried that to a certain extent, but I think it's very different because nobody wants me to be the primary
caretaker?
caregiver of my kid.
Yeah.
They don't want that. They want someone on call that can just leave in an instant and just subsume themselves in the job. Like they just want something different from me. And so saying that I have a responsibility is, they want me to have to pay for it because then I'll work harder to make the money, but they don't like there's a sense of split loyalties of like, well, if, you need to be available and what if your son's sick? And the thing is, if my son's sick, I want to take him to the doctor. And there's a sense of, well, that's something that you shouldn't have to worry about.
Illegal questions.
Well, I mean, it crossed my mind. It's like if I wanted, but the thing is, I also could sense with a lot of the people I was talking to that it wasn't like malicious. It was like, it really was
Curious.
just not knowing the answer. And like part of what I felt my job here was to do was to be like, you're just looking at this wrong. Like the same way you kind of did, where it's like, you need to look at me as somebody who needs this, who's going to work really hard, and who is dying to be a part of what you're doing. And, and who has a lot of experience. And yet one thing that a single parent is humble. Like you have to be. And that's something that you want in at this stage, to hire someone who has that kind of humility to be able to fit themselves into the structure the way you want them to.
Can I ask you a tantalizing question? What was your backup plan? Like, because this is something that I thought about a lot. Like, okay, I never get a job again and I lose everything that I have. Like, what was your backup plan?
Well, there is no backup to I'm never getting a job again.
Well, yeah,
I
mean, like,
there's
what
no backup
do you do?
to that.
Like,
but what I did was, well, so I had a 401k, and so that was kind of like how I was living, because unemployment ran out, and then it was just, 401k.
Done that before too, but go.
Yep.
But like that runs out.
But let's say that runs out. Look, I have a mom that I thought worst case scenario, maybe I have her sell her house, I sell my house because my dad is gone. We buy a house together, and we can kind of all live together, and that way we have sort of shared expenses, and that kind of gives. There is no never get a job. I'm going to get some kind of job. Like I'm going to make money in some way. There's no if I never get a job again. So I think I never felt like there was a backup where it's like, because there isn't. Like, there's no backup in this country if you don't have a job. Like,
I don't mean backup as like, but I guess I just mean worst case scenario. Because for me, I mean, I had a similar thing where my dad and my stepmom moved back from the West Coast during the pandemic to closer to my sister and I. And I thought, well, I could move into their basement. like your son offered you, it's big enough that, my dad has done finished basements before. And even if it wasn't finished, all three of us could fit down there if we had to. And I have thought like, well, if their dad has a job, maybe I just get rid of my apartment and they live with him full time. And then, I get a studio or a room or something, and he would have to be the one. It's kind of, I mean, the cataclysmic options are something that I think people have to think about. And I think that's almost the scariest part is like, because you don't know. Like, I appreciate that you have the confidence that there will be a job. I never had that because I saw the writing on the wall for like,
I would drive an Uber.
Now.
Like you're like, I looked into that.
Yeah.
I looked into, but the first thing I did was after after a month, because the first month was just
crying,
well, it's just overwhelming. It's an overwhelming feel, regardless of how, you separate from your job, whether you're laid off, whether it's you're making too much money and they don't want to pay you, like whatever it is, it's traumatic, and you need to you acknowledge that it's traumatic, and it's not bad that it's traumatic, and you need to, figure out how to deal, because your life is now completely different than it was before, especially you and I, who had never really dealt with this before. Mm-hmm. In previous times, you lived a world in which it wasn't going to be you. You lived in the world of, it might be somebody else. It's not going to be you. And now you live in a world where it can be you at any time. And those are, it's no different than if you're robbed. I have a friend who was robbed, and he didn't know it. The person had broken into his house and snuck into his room while he and his fiance were asleep, stole their jewelry and their laptop, and then got out of there without waking them up. And the next morning, everything's gone, and they had a camera, and they saw the guy. I mean, it's the creepiest thing in the world. The guy sneaking in, taking everything while they're asleep and leaving. I mean, that is traumatic. And they now live in a world where that can happen. And
that
they have to figure
to me easily. I sleep like a rock. But go.
but you know what I mean, though? It's like they now live in a world where they have to, any kind of trauma you have, it changes the world that you live in.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so how do you then need to take enough time to figure out how you navigate that world? What do you need to make yourself feel safe enough that you can function? And for me, doing that was to step back and look at every skill I had, every success I had, every time that I had exceeded my expectations, and I listed it all out, and I said, this is what I can do, and this is who I can be. And then started attacking it that way, where it's like, it's not what's the first job I can take, it's why am I valuable? What skills do I have, and where can those skills work? And just reminding myself that, there's something out there for you because you're good enough.
That was sweet of you. I did a very different thing, which was, okay, I can be poor really easily. Like I can, because I grew up that way, like I had no money, and like I lived when we were younger, like I can modulate my behavior real quick. Like I'm very good at like cutting luxuries. I mean, not that like I said, I don't live very luxuriously, but like, I'll tell you real quick, I'll cut that cable. Fine. We'll read books.
No cable. Yeah.
That like I was very good at deciding what's necessary. And I definitely didn't have that same like I'm going to see what I'm good at and wait for the right job to come along, because that felt way too cocky for me. Like I thought I will take the first job that I can. I did set like realistic salary expectations for myself. Like I knew the bare minimum I could make and like pay my bills. And it was significantly less than it had been. Like you grow comfortable with your income, no matter what it is. If I'm making $2 million, I'm sure that feels like the bare minimum that I could make. But I can snap back real quick to something that's way more, way less money. And so that's what I did, is like I looked at, what am I doing? How am I spending? What isn't necessary? I sacrificed like crazy. I cooked more. I was more conscientious about the way I spent money on food, for example, because plenty of us are throwing out vegetables from the drawer that we never use. So, but like I was, more conscious about what I was making versus throwing away, really, and lived with so closely within my means that it's been hard for me to shake that after getting a job again. That I just went through like. I don't. Like I've got 2 kids. I'm about to go to college. There's not a lot of luxury.
I know.
But like, I don't know going forward, because it happened so many times in that like brief period of time for me. I don't know that I'll ever feel comfortable again. And
and maybe that's not the worst. Like,
maybe it's not, but it sucks. Like,
no, it's not the worst, like emotionally, but like from you'll be better prepared.
I know.
You'll be better prepared for retirement than most.
Maybe, but like, it's funny. I was like, my best friend also had gotten laid off. Again, like I said, everybody's been laid off. And I took her with me to my dad's for some holiday, because she didn't have her kid. And I was like, just come with us. It'll be fine. And we were both talking about being laid off. And my dad's like, you're laid off too? And she's like, yeah, everybody's laid off. Like everybody's getting laid off. It's a thing. And he's like, I don't know how you guys live like this. Like this wasn't, because I think he thought it was just me. Like, I just was failing catastrophically because nobody else he knew. But as soon as there was somebody else, like it clicked for him that it was more than just me. But he's like, I don't know how your generation is living like this, because this wasn't a thing. Like my stepmom worked at the World Bank, and she started when she was 22 and she retired when she was 50. So jealous of that. but there was
Can't even
never a
imagine that.
question
No.
that she was going to get laid off. And my dad had his own businesses and, never had really stable income like the way that I do. But he's used to everybody else having that, like that if you have a job, that's just your job. And like you get fired because you do something bad,
She do something
or
bad.
you have your or you have your job,
My dad worked at the same place for 35 years, and then he was laid off at the end, right? 2 years before retirement. But they got him at 63.
That's evil.
I know. Well, he and the president of the company did not get along. So, he made the wrong enemy. But that was the lesson I thought I had learned, which is don't make the wrong enemy. And it turns out it doesn't matter. Like, I think that's the bit that I had to like let go of the most, which is like, I don't think this had anything to do with me. I really
It doesn't
don't.
have anything. Like you were, and having been on the other side, like as a manager of people, and like sometimes being called into these meetings where they're making the calls, it has nothing to do with you. You are like a number on a balance sheet, and I know that people have said this, but and maybe like if you've got two numbers that are the same and you just need to pick one, like it comes down to like, well, she is more easy to get along with in the lunchroom, and that one
but
is
it
like
could
a pain in
also
the ass.
be this
Maybe.
person lives closer to the office than that person, or it could be this person
Totally.
is first in, first out, or like, there's so many things. But
mostly it's just numbers. It's a pure
just
numbers.
Game. I mean, it's numbers and bad luck.
Well, and it doesn't make you feel any better, like when you're the one who gets laid off, that it's just about numbers. But I mean, the first time it felt very personal, and this is fucking ballsy of me. So it was the beginning of the pandemic, work for a media company. Everybody was losing money because advertisers stopped paying for things because they didn't know what was going to be happening. And we were an ad-supported business. And I knew how much money I made. And I knew that my boss made a lot more money than I did. So I called the president of the company and said, how about instead of laying me off, if you want to save a lot more money, I know I can do her job and my job. And you can just keep me and save more money by letting her. I was desperate. I was like, man, she's not a single mom.
That to me, like we're talking about this in an environment of thousands, tens of thousands of people, federal employees losing their job right now. So it's like very visceral right now.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to me that, I was reading about one of these workers talking about they were a single parent, and they were talking about, what it meant to be, to lose your job as a parent. And it was a dad, and he was talking about like, how am I going to find childcare and this and that? And the comments underneath were so unforgiving. It was all of these people talking about childcare is not the problem. That's your problem, not there. It was like, it was so not understanding that it really, my hope is that the one thing that comes out of this horrible bloodbath is maybe a little more empathy for the whole, what all of this means, that maybe, I know we're killing social services right now, but maybe the, pendulum swings, and maybe the next time it swings back, there's going to be a lot more people that understand how important these things are, like childcare. Like how much, if our healthcare and our childcare were not tied to our job, like, they were supported, how much different would we feel when we lost our job? Like how much would that change?
Well, and even like there's no guilt, or I feel like there isn't. Maybe I'm wrong. I think there's no guilt around people cashing in on their Social Security when their retirement age comes. And it's no different than that. Like I think if we kill Social Security, and Republicans, just to be frank here, like that's the difference we're talking about. Like Republicans who are, anti-big federal government say, oh, wait, this is affecting me now. I want the Social Security because I paid into it. Like maybe, yes, they should have more understanding about things like unemployment or, food benefits or healthcare. But my hope is too, like, I don't want it to be killed. Like, I don't want old people not to have money, but they don't feel guilt around that one because they feel like they've earned it. But it's the same. Like everything else is the same. It's just like a societal safety net because we're all vulnerable, and you don't feel vulnerable until it happens to you.
Or to someone you relate to. I think that's been one of the biggest, it's been so easy in the past to talk about the welfare queens and like to, back in the 80s, and like the sense that there's an entire class of people that just sit around living on benefits. And that's why I don't want to pay for benefits, because they don't go to me or anyone I know. They go to all these other people. They go to illegal immigrants. They go to all these other people. well, we just lost tens of thousands of jobs in a freaking snap of a finger. Maybe, and a lot of them are in places that are Republican strongholds.
What's wild to me is like the idea of anybody being an anything queen on a federal benefit, because unemployment, I maxed out the unemployment and it's a $604 a week. And I don't think it's any different than it was when I was unemployed in like 2000.
Well, and that's tied to how much you make. So a lot of people, they're not making enough money to make
that's
much
what I'm saying. Like,
unemployment.
I maxed it out. So like,
Yeah.
if you made a half or a third of what I made, you're bringing in what, $200 a week?
I think mine maxed out.
Living like a queen on that.
And they've already cut it. Like, I think mine was less than yours.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they've already been cutting it. But like, it's, I mean, we keep saying, we keep pulling up, Nordic countries and saying, look how they can do it. Why can't we? Yeah. And it's this, it's a monolithic culture. There's not anywhere near as much immigration over there. They feel when they see somebody, well, I mean, at least for a long time. And so when they see the dollars being spent, they feel like it's coming to them. And so they'll vote for it. Whereas here, people don't feel like it's such a weird way to live, to feel like things that are meant to help you don't help you, even though they do. Like, it's just, I can't wrap my head around it sometimes, that we're just so willfully self-deceptive about this. And it just, and who ends up benefiting? I know we're turning this into we've been political before, and I let Lily be really political, and I was trying to be like not. And this time around, I'm just like, you know what? Fuck it. I can't. I've been so crazed the past couple of weeks.
It's not the time not to be political about things.
I know, it isn't.
We are in a situation that is dire, and I don't find it political. Like, I just want people
humanistic.
I just
we're
want
in a
people
humanistic
to have
moment.
what they need. I want all of us to have. I want us to have roads. Like,
I know.
That doesn't seem political. I want our planes not to crash.
I mean, it's like, can you imagine if you were in a horrible accident and you then had to figure out how to pay that bill before you could even go to the hospital? Yeah. Like, and that's what we are with unemployment. Like, you lose your job, you're in a horrible accident, and now instead of just feeling like you can heal, you have to figure out how to pay for the hospital bill before you're even able to heal. That's like the world that we live in. And it's crazy because we are the richest nation in the world. Like, that should not be a problem that we have. But anyway, we've zipped around to this a lot. So maybe our last thoughts on how to get, I mean, the sunny side in all this for me anyway, is this forced me to redefine who I am, what I want to do, what I'm capable of, gave me the balls to start a company that I'd never had the guts to do that before. I never would have done that as a single parent. And also taught me how to reach out to people and create connections. And because if you have your own company, you have to constantly, pull on those connections to get work. And it's exhausting to constantly try to get work. But at the same time, I'm able to keep these things alive because I firmly believe that LinkedIn and Indeed and all of these kind of job search places, that for anyone above, like in our industry, they are just dead ends. I just don't think that's, because when you have too much information, which is what everyone has now, then you're going to go back to what you used to have, which is, who do I know? Like, it's going to be the same as it was before we had all of this, because no one can handle. Yeah. Everyone knows how to game the system. So you're just going to go back to, who do you know?
I think it's always probably been that way. Like, LinkedIn has just made it more helpful for when you don't know somebody.
Yeah.
At least in New York, it's almost every single job I've ever gotten has been because of somebody I know or somebody who told me about something. So I think that is a valuable thing to keep in mind, to make the most of your resources. I don't think that there's lessons to be learned here. I will say that. I think it sucks, and you don't have to come out of this better than you went into it, because it's a horrible, traumatic thing that happened. However, so not to like poo-poo Scott's sunny siding this, but I will say this, just this morning, I thought, like, as I was walking into the bedroom, like, it's a Sunday morning, and believe me, I am a sleeper inner, and Scott wants to get up and get this done earlier, and he's not wrong. But this morning I needed to take a shower, so I set an alarm, got up, took a shower, getting myself ready, making coffee. And as I was walking back to the bedroom here to record, I thought, it doesn't even seem hard anymore. And when I have more to do, I do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of came from this too. I launched my own business as well, which has made, literally $1,000 over the year. So it's and I've spent way more than $1,000 on it. But I think that if things had been easy and if my job kind of just like kept plodding along and I, made the money that I made, I never would have taken the risk of starting something on my own. But, I also then got a full-time job. So now I've got a full-time job, a side job, and I, started a podcast, which people have said, like, I don't know how you can do it all, but it's really like you rise to the occasion. And I think that that's one thing that single parents really have. Not that other parents don't or that other people don't, but more than I probably would have when I was married, I have risen to the occasion.
Knowing that about yourself is a positive. I don't know. I feel like I have been able to, I've launched a bunch of stuff. I've learned to bet on myself and diversify. Like, my friend is trying to find the next corporate job and I'm sitting there like, we don't live in that world anymore. You got to learn to diversify, have your side gigs and your side hustles. And the one benefit I've had is I've had enough time to be able to help build up those side hustles that now that I'm more full-time job, I know how to fit it into my life. Like you said, I know how to do more. And you're going to need that. If anyone listening here has a job right now, you still need your damn side hustle. Like you need it. You got to start it tomorrow because that's the world we live in.
It feels like the way that I feel right now is, what I would often think back on my college years and think like, how did I do all of that? Like I woke up, went to school all day, had 3 jobs, part-time jobs, 3 of them, and did homework. When I got home from the job, went to sleep and woke up and did it all again the next day, 5 days a week, and worked on the weekends. And I often would think like, I don't know how I did that, but it didn't feel hard at the time. It just was like, well, this is what I do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel right now is like, I wake up, I do my work, I come home, I do my other work, I go to sleep. There are times when it does feel exhausting and I wish I had more than an hour to myself on any given night. But you are capable of a lot. I'm capable of a lot if I push myself to it.
I know you don't like to say you, but I will say you are capable of a lot.
We all are. We can do it.
We all are.
And if you've been laid off, like let us know in the comments, if there's anything that if there's anything that we didn't think of that's working for you as a single parent or, resources that you can share with anybody else that would be more helpful. Like Scott and I are in a fairly privileged position here, like living in the New York City area. And we kind of have to live here for our work and our families.
And our exes. Yeah.
I'd love to hear about what it's like in other places too.
And on a purely selfish note, if you're listening to us for the first time, please follow us, whether it's on Apple or Spotify. Click that follow button so that we show up in your feed so you can get every episode. We come out every week.
And maybe these 2 single parents will eventually make some money.
I know. We would love that. We would love that. We're on YouTube, so check us out there. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, so very excited about that. So please check us out there. We also have an Instagram, hopeidontfkthisup. We just launched a Substack. So you can see we're talking about doing a lot of things. We're doing a lot of things. The Substack has got things like a little bit more in-depth musings and essays on some of these topics, but also try to put some resources in there so that, like for this particular episode, we'll probably put in some of these resources. I think it's helpful to know what's, just places you can go for help. So we're, as Lily's asking people to send those resources in, it'd be great for us to have those and include those in that, because I think anybody can use a little bit of that help. And then trying to think if we have anything else, like any other places. This is all we are right now, but I'm sure there's like 30 other things we will launch.
There are really only so many hours in a day, though.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like or a crazy comment. We'd love to hear from you, and see you again soon.